get started at 6:05. I have 6:05, so I'm going to start the meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody to the September 11th, 2017 Transportation Commission meeting. The first thing on the agenda tonight is to approve the August 7th, 2017 meeting minutes. Any commission comments?
Nope.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
I got a motion to approve from, I'm going to apologize, Schartz.
Yes.
And a second by Hamby to approve. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, we'll move on to commission item number 2, which is general public comment. This is for anybody that'd like to address the Transportation Commission on agenda items that are not on the regular agenda. Is there anybody that'd like to speak to any non-agenda items tonight? Seeing none, I'm going to move on, close the general public comment, and move on to agenda item number 3, which is a disabled parking request, 1909 Alglena Road. And
Edgeleo.
Edgelea. I hammered that one. Alglena.
Okay, I'm Zach Baker. I'm a project engineer on staff with City of Lawrence Public Works. In April, the Transportation Commission received a request for disabled parking on Edgeley Road in front of the house at 1909 Edgeley Road. This is a local street with 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is not a safe route to school. It is not a bus transit route. It's not on the Douglas County Bikeway Plan, and there is no sidewalk on the sides of the street. It's a residential area with asphalt pavement width of approximately 26 feet and has curb and gutter for drainage. It has on-street parking only on the west side of the street only. No parking allowed on the east side. The property owner that made the request requested 2 handicapped spots in front of their house, as they have a 6-year-old daughter with a disability. There is a driveway, however, they stated they have multiple vehicles. Depending on which vehicle the family, is in, sometimes it's not just as simple to just use the one driveway spot, but they said that there's kind of a high demand for cars that park along the street, but it's difficult to get their daughter into the house from further up the street. So that's where and why the request came in. So city staff, based on the requester's comments, moved to recommend approval for adding reserved parking, or not reserved, handicap parking. The city of Lawrence does have a history of having these spaces allowed. That should have been attached to as part of the report. There's other locations around town where this is allowed. But anyway, so based on that, the staff recommendation was to approve the request. Since mailing out mailers to local residents who live on the street, we have received some feedback for people requesting denial of this request. Most of the reasons cite that the requester has a lot of cars themselves. That's part of the who's using that. They also have said, it's a public street and there's not a lot of options for neighbors to park on the street. So taking 2 spots would just make an already high demand area harder to find parking on the area. But with that, I'll take any questions.
Is there any questions for staff?
Yeah, so do these typically expire? Do you check them every year, or is it just on a request to remove them?
I think it would be on a request to remove basis. It'll get an ordinance to sign it in such a way, and it'll be on a traffic schedule and can be removed whenever, but,
So are you requesting, or are you making a recommendation for approval for 1 spot or 2 spots?
so we are requesting 2 spots, basically just north of their driveway, the length of their property lot line. It'd be about 2 spaces. You can see here a little bit on the, so kind of the yellow highlighted area is kind of where we're thinking.
Right, and somebody would have to have a handicap parking stall to use
Yes,
it?
yes.
That's it.
So on the, I guess, Schedule 4, the reserved parking zones for persons with disability, I assume that's in the city code. And the ones that are crossed out, are those just not,
Those are probably no longer viable. For instance, say if someone moves out of the neighborhood and no longer needs it, then a new ordinance was made to repeal those. And that's probably, I think on the ones that are
The
crossed out, you'll
ordinances,
see there's
everything.
yeah. So it would go to the city commission to pass a new ordinance to repeal it if the need is no longer there.
And those were all a similar situation where they were requested by individuals?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And they all seem to be next to a school or a church or
One of,
multifamily housing.
I know a couple of them are housing, like for people with disabilities.
I know on the Transportation Commission, we've approved these before for individual houses, private.
Well,
Traffic
Jeff, if you're
safety.
done, I don't want to cut you off. I've got 2 or 3 questions. You've touched on a couple of them here in terms of the other areas where you've actually approved these kinds of situations. Are there any that are similar or very much like this residential scenario?
I believe that there were, I don't have the list in front of me, but I believe there were 2 locations that are in northwest Lawrence. I think that were maybe like duplexes or something, but where it's like the whole house has people with disabilities of various kinds. Like you say, there are a few other locations where it's like near a school, where a bus would have a specific area where it could pull in to get them closer to the entrances, but.
Well, my comment would be, I'd be more inclined to give validity to a statement saying, we've done this before, if it were similar circumstances.
Overland Drive has a couple that are parked on the street. They're just on the street with,
In a residential area?
it's right behind Hy-Vee there on
Yeah.
6th Street.
Okay,
And so it's in a residential area, parking on one side of the street, and they have signs
really?
up.
Okay, well, that's real helpful. That's real helpful. How is this enforced? Do the people,
So it would be the City of Lawrence Police Department would, if there was a complaint, if someone was in a spot that was, they didn't have a handicap stickers, anyone on the street could call and make a complaint. So it would be like anywhere else around town if a parking violation was made.
would they be towed or ticketed or?
Probably ticketed, I would imagine. Since this isn't like in a downtown area, it's not like we're gonna have city staff meter maids walking around over there. So it would
Right.
probably strictly be enforced based on a neighbor complaint.
Right. I guess I have a little concern about the position this would put the neighbors in, in terms of turning somebody in, a violation of sorts. We've discussed this in our neighborhood with other issues, and it seems to be an issue. And I'm not exactly sure what that means to me at the moment, but I do think you know, if you're setting up a scenario where you've got a group of neighbors kind of versus each other in terms of, you know, reporting, complaining, gee, that could get pretty tough. I don't know how you avoid that, really. I mean, it's probably going to happen. If it's the right thing to do, I'm sure they'll work it out. But it seems to me that if we were to approve this, it'd be nice to kind of encourage people to, you know, let's get along here if we're gonna do something like this, because it could be a problem not only for the neighbors but for law enforcement, because there may be some people that don't care. So I throw that into the mix of things, and I'm not. I'm just going to let that kind of roll around back there when I'm thinking about this. What requirements would be in place? How do I ask this question? Related to Chris's, what are the codes? What would a building code be reflecting for parking in a neighborhood like this if you have a driveway or not? And that would be another question. Does everybody in this block on both sides have a driveway to park in?
Everybody does, and so like what some of the neighbors had said, you know, this is a public street, so, you know, everyone on the block has a right to any of those spots.
True.
Some of the people who were not in favor of this, you know, there's no parking allowed on 19th Street, and there are houses there that do have a driveway, but, you know, you imagine you have a barbecue over and friends come over, there's really no place near there for a lot of cars to go. Also, it was stated that, especially during like the Douglas County Fair times, that a lot of people flood that street a lot with parking.
Well, Zach, I'm not articulating too well my question. My question is, what would the codes require in terms of parking if you were building a house in this neighborhood? Is this an RS5 or 7 or?
Offhand, I don't have that.
I'm not sure if it's RS5 versus RS7, but the codes wouldn't dictate having reserved parking
On the street?
No.
on the street.
That's what I
It's-
thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
It's permitted, parking is permitted on residential streets unless it's signed otherwise.
Right. And the code would not address the number of vehicles that are, I mean, if it's a rental property, yes, but if it's a private residence,
No, not
You
for
have
single-family residential.
1 or 100, I suppose. Is it fair to ask how many vehicles this family has?
I do not know that answer. I think that there's at least, neighbors have said that they own at least 3 vehicles, but that's based on neighbor
Okay,
If the
information.
requester is here, it'd be good to get that
Okay.
information from them.
okay, good.
I mean, the question of how many permit, with the placard vehicles. I mean, if they only have 2 with placards, they can only,
Well, where I'm going, if there's a request for
Right.
2 spaces,
right.
you know, is that appropriate?
Yep.
Okay? Thank
Any
you.
other questions for staff? Seeing none, I will open it up to public comment. Please come forward, make sure that you sign in on the sign-in form so that you can be contacted when this goes forward, and introduce yourself to us. And
Yeah, hi, my name is Lana Scott. I'm a homeowner at 1927 Edgeley, just up the street. These are my neighbors, and I want to be respectful and accommodating to their needs. But I think there are some other solutions that are better than restricting the parking on the street. As I hear some of our other neighbors have expressed concern, they don't use their driveway for parking their vehicles. Until recently, there's been a large camper trailer that's permanently been parked in the site. If you can see it in the picture, actually, that was there for years. It's recently, within the past maybe 6 months, moved, which has opened up one large spot. I think also with a little bit of rearranging of their furniture and other items that are in their driveway, 2 cars would easily fit in that driveway. I know this can be a pain when you have 2 vehicles for maneuvering in the morning, but I have 3 vehicles. We do a lot of moving our vehicles around to make sure that everybody can get out the door in the morning. So that's, number one, first solution to me is to utilize their driveway for parking their vehicles. The second thing is that I do believe they own 3 vehicles. Over the years, some of those vehicles have stayed parked stationary for days or weeks at a time without being moved. I don't think most of the neighbors haven't called to make complaints because they're our neighbors, and you look past that kind of stuff. Right now, they have 2 vehicles that get regularly driven that I can tell, and the one pretty much stays in the same spot on the street most of the time. So, before we create new areas of possible parking violations, I would prefer that those are, the existing violations are addressed, which I know I understand now would require me calling the city to report it, but until now, I haven't felt the need for that. Another concern I have that I think maybe was something they had requested for as far as their daughter having a clear space to get in and off the bus every day. There used to be like a spray painted square out in front of their driveway where she would stay, where she would wait for the bus, so it was clearly indicated that was where she was going to stand. I've noticed that you can't really see that anymore. I don't know if that's part of, if that was clearly marked for her again in front of their driveway, which shouldn't have anybody parked in front of it anyways. If that might make it easier for her if there is an issue with the school bus picking her up. I don't agree with this proposal and don't think it should be passed. A question I had is what happens after this meeting once everybody's stated their concerns? What's the next step?
The next step would be, if after the Transportation Commission makes a recommendation, I would go to the City Commission for approval, and there would be a public comment process with that, and it would be approved by ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be another process to that. So this board will just make a recommendation, and it goes to the City Commission for approval
Okay.
before it's implemented.
Okay. Great. Thank you for your time.
Does the commission have any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to this agenda item? I see none, so I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I do have a question on, what's the city code for length of time a car can sit on the road without being moved?
48 hours.
Yeah.
48 hours?
It's 48 hours.
Okay.
I don't have any more questions, but do we want to discuss it a little bit, or?
I mean, before we get to, I don't think it's as cut and dry as the staff's recommendation. So, if there's discussions or people want to modify the recommendation, now's the time to listen to that.
I'm looking through the input from neighbors. It seems,
And by the way, I believe, as a footnote to that, we, as a commission, I think can reduce the recommendation, but we can't expand it. We can't make it larger or anything like that, but we can reduce it or deny it, or go with the staff recommendation, so.
Good.
so we could reduce it to 1, I assume, then 1 handicap spot.
My understand, and I'm talking from my traffic safety commission, we could never add more no parking because of the notifications and stuff like that were sent out with this information. If we made it smaller, we would still be following within what the information provided with the notification would be.
Did you have anything else, Aaron?
Well, I really hate the idea of, for someone with a handicap, it is nice to provide them with what they need with a handicap spot, but I do think that the neighbor's input is really important in that if they never park in their parking space and they have cars that are left there for more than 48 hours, I think that makes it a little bit more complicated because it is a good point that if they're never parking in their driveway, that is the best place to park for someone who's handicapped. So it's complicated.
So I'm guessing and I agree with what you're saying, and my question is it about the parking, or is it about the bus having room? I mean, I would expect that the bus could maybe just stop in the street, right?
Well, that's why it's always a little difficult when the applicant doesn't show up to support their cause.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little bit more difficult
Yeah.
to,
'Cause I'm kind of
for us to
reading these
justify
too,
that, so.
And there's, I don't have a positive letter.
And there seems to be a large consensus from neighbors
Yeah.
on what the situation is.
Yeah.
It's challenging to approve on-street parking when off-street parking is available. And I mean, the other cases, as I mentioned, seem to be around some sort of institution, a church or a school. The one example of it being is a multifamily neighborhood where there's rows of duplexes, and so there might be a reason.
And there was one that was
Accessible
closer to
parking there.
campus too, where there was a lot of what I would call student parking going on, and this was reserving a spot that the traffic safety addressed back in, like, I think it was 16. Zach, one question I have, just looking at the aerial, it looks like this is a single vehicle driveway. Is that?
Yeah.
So it's like somewhere around 12 to 15 feet wide or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, the owner could, perfectly lawful, within city code, have a wider driveway if they so choose to build one.
Well, one of the neighbors said that it is a rental.
Okay.
I mean,
it's
I guess
just- yeah.
what I'm saying is you'd have to get approval from
Sure,
the landlord.
right.
and-
Right.
It is a single? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I drove by there the other day. I had visualized something different.
You can see it pretty good on Google Earth Street View too, but
Yeah.
Pretty much camper in that driveway.
and they pointed out it's gone, but, so as far as moving this forward, I mean, I think I could support one, not more than that, maybe 25 feet long, just north of the driveway, but just from practice when I was on Traffic Safety Commission, we typically supported that. It just helped that person that does have a handicap or a person with a disability that living with them, makes their life just a little bit easier. Understanding they do have a driveway, but maybe the bus comes into play too, and that can help with the busing situation, but that's kind of where I am.
I think that's where I'm at too. Zach, is there room to stack 2 cars in that driveway?
The driveway length would allow for that, yes.
Mhm.
Whether or not they currently can, because as she said, there is some lawn furniture at the end of it.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think I'm with you guys, and I would support 1. I think 2 wouldn't be appropriate, but it seems to me that 1 would be accommodating and be less disruptive to the overall neighborhood than 2 would be, and I think that would be fair, so.
I'm not sure I would even support 1 if I'm hearing that they don't even use their own driveway.
I thought that too until I started thinking about the issue with the bus pulling up. And I think the bus does sort of need that space in the street. But
Yeah, that was
I
the only
agree.
reason I would approve, is if you need space for the bus.
Yeah.
Then
And so
definitely, because the
that
bus ain't gonna pull the
changes-
driveway.
Yeah, that sort of changes
But
my mind.
how does this affect the bus?
If they didn't park there, that would leave a vacant space for the bus to pull in.
If you're saying if they, instead of parking there, it was just an open vacant space
Right.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The bus could kind of pull over to the side.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Not park.
that wouldn't limit the bus from operating. They can still come out of the driveway,
Right.
whether there's a car there or not.
Right,
So
Right.
to me, that's kind of irrelevant,
yeah.
because they can still operate. Is this a wheelchair person? Crutches?
As far as I know, she's not in a wheelchair or doesn't use a walker. I don't know exactly what her disability is, but there isn't she doesn't need assistance with a wheelchair or a walker for mobility.
I'm waffling a little bit, as usual. I think
Well, you know,
primarily
I'm
David's
Harvard
comment.
here, and I'm saying no, so.
I mean, David's comment that, you know, when the advocate is not here,
Yeah.
there's got to be something missing from that.
And you don't have anything in any of these that are, usually you get a little bit of both, you get pros and
Yeah.
cons, but there's
Yeah.
no neighbor
Support. Yeah.
support, so it's not like you can say, well, this neighbor doesn't like her, so they're picking, you know, it's,
Mhm.
that's not it, so
And I was just erring on so I'd given them the benefit of the doubt, saying this is, I think, fair and moving it on ahead, so.
The only other piece to me that is difficult is that if they really are just parking a car there for weeks to store stuff in, it's not really what the street's intended for. But I also like to give people the benefit of the doubt. So.
I think it's a neighborhood issue.
Yeah, and I think
mean,
that's
yeah, it's
exactly,
hard.
it's a neighborhood issue that might be time maybe to approve the one space and neighbors to start calling on the car that doesn't move.
Well, we can recommend approval, but we can is there anything we can add in a footnote for the commissioners to consider entertaining more information, or, you know, or should we get more information? I don't want to defer it. I think we can move on, but Dave, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you could defer it, or as you've kind of been discussing, allow the one parking space. Those are really the two options. If you need more information, then I would recommend deferring it. I don't know why the applicant isn't here. That is, I mean, it's challenging when they don't attend and they've made the request, because there could be other information that we all don't have to make the decision.
If we deferred it, there would be no guarantee that they would appear in a month.
That's true. And then we, go through the notification process again, and so that's the challenge. I don't have any other information on the homeowner or the children's disability or those other circumstance. I don't have anything unless Zach does. And
No, from the
you have to go.
Sorry. From a staff perspective, we receive a request, and then that seems fair enough request, and we have done it before elsewhere in town, and then you send the notifications, and then you get some of the feedback that we have. That's kind of after the report's been doctored or drafted. So again, new information has come to light that we pass along, but then that's for you to make the tough call.
Well, I think David asked a question about, would this be renewable on a yearly basis, or is this like forever?
Once it's adopted, it's an ordinance, so it goes on the books, and until it's revisited, it's not an annual basis. I mean, I don't believe any of the other ones have been time requirements. That's I guess something that I don't have an answer to, but I know the last two that I've been familiar with, the Pennsylvania Street one and the Overland Drive one, did not have time requirements. So we would assume with this that we would proceed with adopting it. It'd be an ordinance, and then until it's rescinded, it would remain in effect.
These are the owners, it's not a rental, correct?
No, I believe it is a rental.
That's where I was confused.
Can we make a recommendation or remark that place that she said is kind of faded? I mean,
I don't know if it was marked. It was unlikely marked by the city. I don't think that we brought in marking the street, bus zone areas for residential houses. So they may have done that with spray paint, I don't know. There's nothing that I saw from any of the aerial images or the street view that showed any markings out there, so that's news to me. But we don't mark bus stops in front of residential houses, so.
That was the residents marked there, that was for them to work on getting her to have a place to wait for the bus.
Another option is to deny it, and then if the applicant's really interested, they can go to city commission and take up the case at that
Fine.
point, but.
So I guess that would be, I have one more question, not to be cynical, but if that handicap spot is approved and the car that apparently just sits there, is it more challenging? I mean, if that's just a storage spot or becomes that, does that become sort of an issue to move that car? I don't know if that's...
The 48 hours doesn't
48.
apply to that vehicle.
Yeah, does the 48 hours apply to, thank you, does the 48 hours apply to a handicap spot?
I think it should. I think it does. I mean,
So they would have to flip their vehicles.
they'd have to move the vehicle within 48 hours if it's parked on street.
Okay.
But we have very few of these in Lawrence. I think if you look at there's 5 existing ones on our schedule. I don't have any other history on those and enforcing them and how they've worked. So it is kind of a unique circumstance. But I would assume that we still follow the standard on-street parking code for the 48 hours.
Is there any other commission discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion. I've heard various things, so we'll see what happens here.
Well, I entertain a motion that we deny it and let them bring it up to the city commission. I don't know how you word that as a motion, honestly.
I have a motion to deny the request for 2 handicap parking spaces. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Dillon, a second by Commissioner Payden to deny the request for 2 parking spaces on Edgeley. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of denying the request? Aye.
Aye.
Signify by aye.
Aye.
We'll try that one more time. All those in favor of denying the request, motion by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to denying the request, motion by nay.
Nay.
I have, I think it's 7-1, 6-1. So Commissioner Evans not
6-1 to deny the request.
deny the request.
So the city commission will get that, and they'll see that the 7-1 had some meaning in terms of the
Right.
discussion, and
With-
they'll also get the detail of the discussion that we had.
Yeah.
What do they just see, what do they see, Dave?
With your opposing vote, he should be able to say, this is why I oppose the vote, and like add the footnote that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Should I do that?
Yeah,
now?
if you do that would help us, and then
Okay.
to answer your other question, we provide the minutes of the meeting.
Well, I
so-
think it was reasonable to consider 1 handicap space. I think it was reasonable to consider that. I don't think that I really had enough information from the person that applied for this to be definitive about it either way, honestly. And I would have just, it would have been interesting to see how we would have voted. I should have spoken up if we had, voted for 1, just to see what the number count would be, maybe giving the city commission a little more information. to see where we were at. Because there were a few of us that were kind of, yeah, that seems reasonable, but maybe it's too late to do that. But honestly, I just thought it was reasonable to consider. I can't say that I think it was the right or wrong thing to do.
So I guess my question would be, since I made a motion to deny 2 spots, can we make it? I mean, can there be a motion maybe? I don't know.
I would,
Yes.
Okay,
But I guess my question is, do we want to do that? The reason I sent it on, I could support 1 too, but the reason I sent it on is because we don't have the applicant here.
Right.
And I'm hoping that encourages them to come to the city commission and state their case, which they
Okay.
didn't do today other than their letter.
well, hopefully they can get the message that I sent, and maybe that's just as effective as
right.
taking a vote, It might, I think you're right, David, that might be more confusing to them.
I don't think we want to get in the, just from my standpoint, kicking the can down the road. If a requester doesn't show up, well, we just defer it until they can come talk to us. We need to
Yeah.
act on these things and
Right.
move forward with agenda items. They're here, staff is here, they're presenting, we're all taking time out of our schedules. We need to act on these agenda items, so. I
Agreed.
mean, we've acted on it, and it's going to be, our approval is a recommendation to the city commission. Or recommended for denial. Our recommendation. With that, let's move on to agenda item number 4, which is traffic calming on Rockledge from 6th Street to 9th Street. We'll start out with the staff report. Zach's been busy this month.
Okay, this one is a traffic calming request for Rockledge Road between 6th Street and 9th Street. In May, the Transportation Commission received an official request from an area resident for Rockledge Road to be considered for traffic calming. Traffic data had been collected by staff in September of 2016. This had been brought up before, and so we already had previous counts that would work. So based on that count information, well, before I get to that, I'll give you the street characteristics. This is a collector street. The speed limit is 30 miles an hour. It is not a safe route to school. It is a bus transit route. It is a part of the proposed Douglas County Bikeway Plan. It's a proposed bike route. There is sidewalk along the east side of the street. Most of this east side of the street is Lawrence City Park. It is asphalt pavement with a width of approximately 26 feet and has curb and gutter for drainage. The 85th percentile speed of traffic on Rockledge is approximately 36 at the one location and 40 at the south point where we took our counts. 40 miles an hour. Traffic volumes did not meet criteria to recommend traffic calming, but the speed limits, the 85th percentile speed limit is greater than 5 miles over what the posted speed is. So it does meet criteria A for traffic calming. With that, and you should have also gotten some correspondence from I think it's Sunset Hills Neighborhood Association in favor of this. So with that, staff recommends approval of the request for traffic calming on Rockledge.
Any questions for staff? Zach, I had a question. Is there any accident information on this stretch of road?
We did not take crash data. We can obtain that, but speeds through here was great enough to consider it.
Just asking.
Yep.
Yeah, I had that question too, and a few others. We probably asked the engineers this question before, and I'm curious, I know you can't be definitive about it now, I'm sorry. What would traffic calming do we think? How many speed humps would you have between 6th and 9th? What would it take to get it down to the level of being less than 35 miles per hour in terms of the 85th percentile? Just kind of what difference would it make? I know it would make a difference, but I have a few other questions if you want to take a shot at that one now.
Well, to get, to affect the speed and to get it closer to the speed limit, it just depends on the stretch of the length of the road, and then providing adequate spacing for speed bumps, if that's the device that we would use, and that would be what would be very likely in this situation. So I don't know what the distance is between between 6th and 9th. It would likely be three or four speed humps. We would go through the process of getting adjacent property owners to approve those so they could affect the distance and the spacing of the speed humps depending on getting 70% approval within 300 feet by the policy. So that would factor in as well as the side streets and intersections. So we would determine that when we got into the design phase if we have funds available for the project.
Right. Well, I don't know, I've gone over a lot of speed humps and speed cushions in Lawrence. Some of them seem to have a little different profile and be a little higher and maybe cause people to slow down a little bit more. Many of them, like the one on Louisiana Street that we put in this summer, seem to be, honestly, from time to time I'll forget it's there and I'll just go over it. And it's like, oh, well, that wasn't too bad. I'll slow down, but someone else may just say, oh, well, I can go over that one without damaging anything. Can you create different vertical profiles for those things and maybe get a little more value out of them? David, have you?
I think there's a standard.
Yeah, we have a standard detail. In the past, we did not, and so it was probably more of a case-by-case basis on who was doing it, whether it was our street division that installed a few or a contractor.
Yeah.
So we've developed a standard. The interesting thing about it is even speed bumps that we've put in here in the last year or two, we get complaints that they're too high, we get complaints that they're too low, that there's too many, that there's too few. So it's a balancing act. We want them to be effective, but we don't want to damage vehicles. And so there's a little tolerance, I think, on constructing them because they're difficult. They have a parabolic curve, and so that there's some tolerance in there that they may not all be exactly the same, but we do have a standard detail that strives to kind of standardize the height, and I think it's 4 inches or yeah.
We currently use 3 inches. A lot of communities use between 3 and 3.5 inches. There is some difficulty constructing it. There's some construction tolerances. Corvette has a clearance of 4 inches. So we want to stay so that everybody can clear. That's the most common, I guess, vehicle that is a problem with the speed humps. So we want to make sure that the road is accessible to everybody.
So everybody needs to drive Corvettes.
And there's also residents in Lawrence that modify their cars, and we want to make sure that everybody is able to use the streets.
Well, my 2 cents is I think they really have limited value for the money that's spent. Honestly, I think if you're looking at Rockledge Road, you're talking about 3 or 4, probably you guys have said before, every 200 or 300 feet, plus or minus, is kind of a rule of thumb. And if they're $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a piece, you're talking, you know, you're talking some significant money at the end of the day. I do understand also that another question, what is the PCI on Rockledge there, and when might you do, you know, a road renovation project where you could incorporate these in and maybe make it a little more cost effective? Knowing that these things get approved and they go in a bucket, who knows when they're really going to get, you know, budgeted. It could be likely a long time, but there's 2 or 3 questions there, Zach and Dave and Nick, if you want a shot at them, go ahead.
I'll take a chance at the PCI questions. I don't know the PCI on Rockledge. I know we just recently milled and overlaid 9th Street. I'm not sure about Rockledge, but I don't know if there would be any more economies in doing it with a mill and overlay project or a pavement maintenance project versus our new traffic control annual project, because now that we've budgeted $200,000 a year for traffic control devices, we can lump all of those into one contract and let them all at once, and we get some economies by doing that. So I don't know if there's a difference in timing wise whether we do it with a maintenance project or wait till it moves up the list to the priority to get in our annual traffic calming project budget. On the cost, I think the speed humps are around $6,000 to $8,000, roughly speaking, depending on the width of the road.
I was a little high then.
And
Okay.
the material. We, again, generally speaking, spacing is 300 to 400 feet. I think it's what we've tried to do if we get approvals from.
But this one will be a
Roads.
speed cushion if it is used because it's a collector.
Yeah, in this
good
instance,
point.
since it's Collector
Yeah.
Street, we would do the speed
Which-
cushions, which have the
Which are
cutouts.
even easier to navigate through.
Harder to
Yeah.
construct and easier to drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Harder to
Particularly if
cons-
you use them the same road a lot,
Mhm.
you'll figure that out, and you probably won't slow down a whole lot.
They're still effective. I mean, we have speed cushions on Lawrence Avenue between
yeah.
6th and 9th, and I think those are pretty effective.
Mhm. Mhm.
Even with the cutouts for people that will scoot over. I drive that every once in a while, but so I mean, if we're looking to calm traffic on the street to the posted speed limit, which is 30 miles an hour, and the 85th percentile speed is 36 to 40, then traffic calming would be the most effective way to do it.
Couple of,
This is one, when it gets off the list, the neighbors are notified and talked to.
A plan.
Yeah, when it moves up to the list and we have funds to do the project, we would begin the process of notifying the neighbors. We like to work with the neighborhood to help facilitate the discussion and get signatures and consensus on the traffic calming device and the location. And then we would develop plans. I think we would, like last year, we brought the plans of this body before the city commission and we had a letting. So we'll go through all that design process when we have funding.
is this a collector street? It is a collector. If we did calm the traffic there, do you think it would cause drivers to go somewhere else? Like over to Iowa Street or Crestline or Lawrence Avenue instead of Rockledge? I mean, would there be an effect on rerouting people?
Potentially, but, I think a lot of your traffic's coming from like off of McDonald Drive, to Rockledge there, and then they continue south to get to, 9th Street or wherever, but, yeah, I mean, there's always the potential for it to shift traffic elsewhere, but in this case, Iowa's, if they're probably avoiding Iowa for a reason, and that's why they're
Yeah.
speeding down this one, so
Yeah.
maybe that would be better for them to go to Iowa so that, and stay off the, it's a collector, not a residential street, but,
Which
stay
could
up
probably
further
handle
away
a
from
little
a
more
residential
traffic.
area, yeah.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got to ask you about stop signs, so I'll just go ahead and do it. If you look at, there's 3 east-west streets that die at Rockledge, that dead end at Rockledge. One of them is a cul-de-sac. That's the furthest one to the south. And then there's two other. One is Century and one is Mound View, I think. And what would be the engineering view of adding stop signs at either of those intersections on Rockledge?
Well, we would follow guidelines of the manual and uniform traffic control devices, look at crash history, traffic volumes on Rockledge and on the side streets to determine if warrants indicated the need for stop signs. And unless there's other situations that are other limiting factors like sight distance, those would be the guidelines, and we would do the study and then make a recommendation. I would not anticipate any of these intersections meeting warrants to create all-way stops at the intersections. And I wouldn't recommend putting all-way stops in because it reduces the compliance of the stop sign. People will roll through the stop signs, not adhere to them, and they tend to speed up in between as they're trying to make up lost time for stopping unnecessarily. So I don't see any benefit on reviewing adding stop signs on this stretch. But
Okay. Well, it just seemed to me that it would also be a traffic calming solution, maybe not within a reasonable civil engineering standard, but it would slow people down, and people do speed up in between speed humps too, kind of do the same thing, so.
But it's a passive control measure, so there's nothing saying you have to slow down
Right.
or stop for a stop sign, and then we've always been told stop signs are not for speed control.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
just something to keep in mind.
I'm with you on the stop sign.
Yeah,
You know,
like-
I just think it was a reasonable question, given, if you're gonna spend money on 100, whatever, for traffic calming, what about a couple of stop signs? But I'm total believer that stop signs are not that effective most of the time,
Yeah.
you know.
So
Sorry.
it creates potential for accidents or crashes.
Yeah,
So that's the real downside.
right.
Is there any other questions for staff? With that, thanks. Open it up to public comment on this agenda item.
Good evening, you guys. Thank you for your hard work and service to our community. I'm the one that initiated the traffic calming device request, and with the Sunset Hill Neighborhood Association, the traffic survey. And this came as a result of history of an ongoing concern for the condition of traffic along Rockledge between 6th and 9th Street. Don't have the crash data with me, but there have been many near misses as well as accidents, some reported and others not, along that street. And I don't need to remind you that the city park, Centennial Park, is located right there, which draws a lot of pedestrian and bicycle traffic, as well as the skate park that has gone unmentioned until now, and the single sidewalk on the east side of the street. Hoping that all of these factors, as well as others that are even more obvious, will help you to move to recommend approval to the City Commission. To speak to Commissioner Evans' comment about what a traffic calming device could do, I think that just as a driver, that it creates awareness or allows you to take a moment, whether you're driving around those gaps for emergency vehicles or just slowing down, to recognize that there's an obstruction in the road. I think that that's enough of a case to make for traffic calming and its success in slowing the driver down. One other comment is that in April I conducted a poll of the residents along Rockledge, and about 80% of those roughly approved of the idea of traffic calming on Rockledge based on their own personal experiences on that street. Now I know some of those residents have probably changed, and then that poll may need to be recreated in the future as we approach a time where that funding is possible. But I'm willing to perform that legwork and advocate as much as possible, as much as needed.
For the record, I just want to make sure Clint Idle.
That's correct.
Perfect. Any questions for the speaker? I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that'd like to speak to this agenda item?
Hello, I didn't know I was supposed to sign in somewhere.
Isn't there a sign in up here?
Sorry. My name is Mariana Nieto, and I'm a homeowner on Rockledge Road. And I feel there is a need. I think that people use Rockledge Road to avoid Iowa, and they're in a rush and a hurry, and that is just the perfect situation for them to speed through from 6th to 9th and 9th to 6th. We do have a lot of kids that go to the park, and the safety of our neighbors as well, who like to walk their animals, their dogs, at the park. My bedroom window faces Rockledge, and I constantly hear cars speeding by, flooring it. When I'm up late at night, during the day or in the evening when I'm watching TV, I do feel that there is a strong need for it, just for the safety of our neighborhood and anybody else who uses Centennial Park.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to this agenda item? I don't see anybody else, so I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I'll say that I'm in support of this. I'd encourage staff to potentially look at a pedestrian island in combination with maybe a mid-block crossing to get maybe in line with the parking lot to get people from the park and back, because there is no crossings except at 9th and 6th. So maybe that's an option that can be used in combination with the speed cushions. So.
Any others? Discussion?
I think that's a critical point also, is that its proximity to Centennial Park. And I've often said this park in particular, but a lot of Lawrence parks seemed hemmed in by collectors or arterials. So there are actually quite a few of them are hard to get to on foot, and much easier to drive to a parking lot. This is the one, because it's one of the ones I walked to as a child, from a friend's house at the corner of Rockledge and 9th, that always felt a little inaccessible. So I would also say it would be great to see a pedestrian island or something with that.
Any other commissioners I'd like to discuss, or I'm open to motion?
I'll move that we approve staff's recommendation for traffic calming on this section.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion to approve the traffic calming for Rockledge from 6th Street to 9th Street from Commissioner Hamby, and a second by Commissioner Payton. All those that agree, motion by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 5 is a crosswalk request for Louisiana Street from between 27th and 31st Street. Start with the staff report.
Okay, this item is request for a crosswalk on Louisiana Street, somewhere between 27th and 31st Street. There was also a request for traffic calming. Louisiana Street in this section is an arterial street. Speed limits are posted at 30 miles an hour. It is a safe route to school. It is not a bus or transit route. It is an existing Douglas County bike route. There is sidewalk along both sides of the street. And this is in a residential area. This also has a city park. Broken Arrow Park is on the east side of this street in this section, and there's also an elementary school on the east side. And then you have residential areas on the west side. Because this is an arterial street, there's the City of Lawrence traffic calming policy basically just addresses collector and local streets. So there's really no policy per se for how to deal with arterial streets, but there is a history of speeding on this street. The 85th percentile traffic speed on this is approximately 40 miles an hour. So it's over 10 over what the posted speed limit is. Because of the elementary school in close proximity and with the city park next door, there's a lot of pedestrian generators. And so the request for a crosswalk to get people over to those two places seemed reasonable. So staff recommends the Transportation Commission approve the request for a crosswalk. We are proposing locating one just south of 29th Terrace, and this is kind of an illustration of what that might look like. At 27th Street, there's already a tunnel that kind of gets you underneath Louisiana Street, so it was thought that maybe another spot located further to the south and more in line with Broken Arrow Park would make sense. Other background information: on the southwest corner of 29th Terrace, there is new land development that's going to have even more homes, residential homes in that area. It will have sidewalks as part of that development plan that will be connected to the sidewalk here at Louisiana Street, so likely there'll be even more pedestrian potential in this area. So this is kind of what we were proposing. There's Louisiana Street has had these traffic islands installed and crosswalks installed further to the north at like 25th, 2500 block, and I think just in the 2400 block as well. So there's two basically identical things like this that's further to the north. So this is what we were recommending at this location. I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Zach, do a lot of people, where you're proposing this crosswalk, do a lot of people run across the street there? I mean, is there any?
The requester said that she does. They have a hard time getting across the street there, as people use Louisiana Street, the 31st Street, kind of as a bypass of 23rd Street. So, especially down at the south here, where there's currently not a ton of houses, it's kind of a bit of a speedway there, and some of the traffic speed data that we collected reflected that, especially further to the south end. We saw some speeds that were excessively over 30 miles an hour. So, having that next to an area where you're encouraging pedestrians and bicyclists, and in Broken Arrow Park, and then also an elementary school so close, it made sense to place a crossing kind of further to the south. Because as I said before, at 27th there is already a tunnel where you can get across it safer. So this way, for people living further to the south of this section, would have a more reasonable access to get across. Today, I believe, as part of, we didn't get it posted till late, but one of the sheets that I handed out to you, another neighbor to the requester said that they were handicapped, confined to a wheelchair, and that getting across the street there over to Broken Arrow Park was difficult. So, and they, requested that there would be, handicap ramps installed as well. But if this was installed, there would have to be that installed as part of that project too. So,
Well, I really support this. I bike and drive my car on this road a lot, and there's a lot of traffic. And I don't know if you've done traffic counts, but since K10's been open, I think a lot of people are going to take, rather than 19th to Haskell and Harper, to get out to K10, are going to go Louisiana to 31st and to Haskell and out. That's how I go to Kansas City now. So I would suspect that traffic has probably increased there, and it's a lively place, particularly 8:30 in the morning, and then in the afternoon when school is out there, everything is going on there. So I think this is a good idea, personally.
Any other questions for staff?
Additionally, I would just show some of the speed data that we picked up. Because this is an arterial, the traffic volumes is going to be a lot, significantly more than what we typically would present to you on like a collector street. But some of the numbers of cars that were excessively speeding was a little bit shocking. Greater than 50 miles an hour, almost 300. And this is
I believe it.
down at the south end of the project, right in the area in front of Broken Arrow Park. So where we took the counts further to the north, closer to the elementary school, people do slow down a little bit when they get closer to there, but down in front of the park, they're once they get off of 31st Street, they're hitting it pretty hard.
Thank you. David, this is just for my own clarification. We don't have any arterial roads, to my knowledge, that have traffic calming on them. The standard, I mean,
Correct.
roundabouts and that type of stuff.
Yeah, we don't put we have not by practice put speed humps, speed cushions.
But Louisiana has these mid-block the crossings.
Yeah,
right
and
into
you know, honestly, I see these as a traffic calming device. They're not as effective as vertical deflection, but they do narrow the road and create some traffic calming. And most importantly, having the, you know, for a crossing like this, having the pedestrian refuge island where you can cross half at a time. That's important in addition to slowing down traffic. So,
Thank you.
This standard also has the yield for pedestrian by state law, doesn't it? I think the others on, north 2400 block have that, I think. Is that a standard for these?
I don't know if it's a standard. We would have the fluorescent yellow pedestrian signs. We've used those in certain circumstances where they're in the middle of the street, posted in the street. I think we have some downtown. I don't think that, I don't recall having them at these splitter islands. The one south of 23rd at Checkers, I'm pretty sure we didn't put that in because I worked on that project a number of years ago.
I think it does have.
Maybe it got added.
I think it does.
But have to. We'll look at that when we do the signing to be consistent.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I totally support, because I live right near there, and the traffic has greatly increased since they hit Menards, and K-10 has been extended, and I have a good friend whose newly licensed daughter got rear-ended, so I don't see anything wrong with it at all.
Yeah, I've just been out there on bike. Seems like a good opportunity to connect these sections of shared use path as well, because if you come off that spur from the loop and head north on Louisiana, there's nowhere to cross. And it's impossible to cross with the traffic. So I sat there for probably a good 5 minutes with my family waiting for an opening to get across Louisiana Street up by the parking lot. Otherwise, you have to go clear up to the tunnel and come back down. And so it'd be a good way to connect that bikeway and the shared use path, but also the neighborhood.
It seems like, I don't know what the width of this, but it seems like it might be hard to get a bike through, well, I guess with the crosswalk.
You mean the shelter in the middle?
Yeah.
It's pretty narrow, but they should be yielding. Yeah.
Yeah, through there. Okay.
How difficult is it later on to cross a light pedestrian
Off Beacon.
cross lane?
if we're doing a traffic signal light, like a pedestrian hybrid beacon, we would look at the pedestrian crossing numbers to see if they met the threshold for having a signal crossing. There's some, depending on the pedestrian crossing volume and the street volume, there's some warrants that provide guidance on the need for signalized pedestrian crossings. And that's what I would recommend doing if we see significant pedestrian volumes and it meets the need. Those are very expensive to put in. So this is kind of a more low-cost option. It's similar to other crossings that we have on Louisiana Street, and not knowing how, the use right now, we don't have a pedestrian count. I think this will get used. I mean, it's pretty convenient to get the park, getting to the park to cross at this, where we have it proposed. We don't have those numbers at this point.
I was going to say, I support this request right now, but this intersection, I ride through there as well. When you're coming from the west on the shared use path, it just stops, and if you want to get back over on that part that goes under to the wetlands, you have to go all the way north to this and catch it there, and it's difficult. And so this is one of those intersections that I think there's a really good opportunity to design as the development occurs, because at 31st and Louisiana right now, there's just a four-way, is that right? Or an all-way stop? Or is there like...
31st and Louisiana is a three-way stop.
Right.
And,
So-
yeah, the sidewalk on the west side, the northwest corner, there's no ramp crossing at
No.
that intersection.
No, and it curves off to the north.
Curves
and
to the
then-
north, so if you're on the east side and you go under the underpass and come up, this would be the first opportunity to have a marked crosswalk to get back to the west side and then around. So yeah, that intersection is challenging for crossing for
Yeah, so I
pedestrians.
guess I would, want the commission or someone to really take a good look at this entire intersection and this part of it and think about what it should look like in the future as well. But again, like I said, I do support this crosswalk there.
I mean, with this recommendation, I mean, that location, we're not setting the location. I mean, staff has some flexibility with that. I mean, the request was from 31st to 27th, wasn't it? Or is the staff recommendation at this location?
My recommendation for a crosswalk would be at this location. I think this is the best
Yeah.
location to put it in. If there are, if we're also looking at a crossing to help at 31st in Louisiana, or a bicycle crossing, I think that would need to be addressed separately. Or, I mean, it could be tied into a project, but I think it's a separate discussion, because this wouldn't be really designed as a bicycle facility. You could obviously, on the shared use path, bike up to it and still get across and use the sidewalk. But if there's other concerns further to the south, I think that would need to be addressed separately, and that I would see this as a standalone project.
When putting this crosswalk in there, reduce the likelihood of putting something further south? So would that be too many crossings within a short distance?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think 31st in Louisiana, to be quite honest, I think there were some design omissions there with that intersection when, it was put in with the SLT through the KDOT project, through the SLT project done by KDOT. There wasn't sidewalk crossing there at that intersection on the north leg, and it's, I think that could have been included. So I think that's a separate project. I don't think this decreases the likelihood of future improvements at that intersection if it's needed. 27th Street to 31st is about half a mile, and so this is in between about a quarter mile spacing, which is I think, a pretty good spacing for crossings at quarter of a mile. I mean, and so if there's some concerns at 31st in Louisiana in relation to the rec path crossing there, that's along the north side of 31st, and then on the east side of Louisiana, that would be addressed separately at that intersection.
All right, thank you, David. I think I hear pretty strong support for the crossing, so I entertain a motion at this time.
Can I add one thing too before?
Yeah.
I can't remember if Zach mentioned it, but we, as far as the funding for this goes, we would recommend now, as we get into discussing the bike ped prioritization criteria, to begin using that once we get through that process to adopt it, to use that criteria to prioritize improvements, so that I would anticipate that this would get lumped into other projects and look at the factors that we'll end up talking about here later this week at the study session to evaluate priorities. So that's just a footnote on the timing of potentially funding and constructing the project.
Thanks.
So this is a graphic copy, it doesn't go into that.
Correct.
All right, well, I move to support this recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I have a motion to approve crosswalk request at the location indicated by staff by Commissioner Severin and seconded by Commissioner Dillon. All those that agree signify by yay.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay. Aye.
All those, aye. All those opposed signify by no. Motion carries. Next agenda item is staff items. Yay.
Couple things. The first is we will begin taking minutes at study session meetings each month. Our next study session meeting is this Thursday, September the 14th. So we will be simply just video recording them and then posting those online so the public can view those at their convenience. Again, those study session meetings, they're not for action items. They're just information and educational and discussion on some of the topics we're looking at. So that's one note that we're going to begin doing here going forward. The second thing is, in talking about this upcoming meeting here, the September 14th meeting at the study session is a draft of our listing for bicycle and pedestrian prioritization projects. We have posted that information online today on the webpage that you can go in and look at the maps and the criteria. This is based off of our discussion from last month's meeting on beginning to try to find a scoring system to rank projects. So staff has gone in and used the criteria to develop, to rank the projects that are, the pedestrian projects that were identified as the priority: safe routes to schools, arterial streets, collector streets. The bicycle projects that we ranked were on the bikeway network, and the priority projects from the priority route from the bike ped task force. So we wanted to get this information out a couple days in advance so that you could take a look. I would note that one of our scoring criteria for pedestrian and bicycle projects, as far as safety goes, the crossing, that's not something that is GIS based that we can take from the map and then produce the score. So we would need to go in and add that score for each project, and so we have not done that yet. But this just gives, I guess, a good idea on based based off of the criteria that we presented last month, how some of the projects or streets or corridors would score based off that criteria. So just information that you can think about before the meeting on Thursday, and we'll look for input and really, I think, would like to thank our MPO and IT staff that's done a lot of work to be able to plug all this data in and get the output on the table. So we're looking for feedback from you guys on Thursday at the study session for that item. So that's been posted, and that is all the staff items that I had. I guess one more thing I would mention that I updated the future meeting calendar today online, so that's up to date for the rest of the year and projected dates for agenda items.
Dave, I'd like to just offer one comment about the Thursday meetings. I think it's good that they're going to be recorded. I'm not going to be able to attend Thursday, so it's really going to be nice to see what occurred. I would recommend that we think about how those meetings are facilitated. I tend to think the more informal we can be, maybe it's good sometimes, but I recall last month, and I'm sure you'll recall what I'm talking about, it seemed like the public got, maybe in my opinion, a little too engaged directly. And it seemed to me that it made the meeting less effective for us. And my only point is that whether it be you or Charlie or Chris having more or less conducting the meeting and trying to facilitate
Keep it on track.
public comment when it's appropriate, and, just trying to control that aspect of it. I know we're a public entity, and that's part of the deal, and I really encourage that because that's who we're working for. But I do think that there needs to be just a little bit more structure on those Thursday meetings.
Anything else on staff items? Any questions for Dave? All right, next item on the agenda is commission items. We have an update on the Complete Streets Subcommittee.
I can do that.
Okay.
I met today with some folks from Public Works, and there were 5 or 6 of us kind of tossing this around, and I think I was really happy with the progress we made. The subcommittee began by looking at the policy, and we kind of looked at the policy thinking, well, we have a lot of questions about this, and how is it used, and how has it been used? And we, I guess, essentially took a little time out until we could get some comment from Dave and others regarding this. And in a nutshell, what we determined today was that we kind of need to put process in front of looking at the process for evaluating complete streets before we look at the policy. It's kind of like cart and horse analogy, I think, in a way. Personally, I think that we're not going to get master's degrees up here in complete streets, and I think we need some help in understanding what the basic elements are and what they mean and what's achievable, and look at how that could be evaluated in a way that would be simple and meaningful for us. Boil it down to, some parts that we could get our arms around and evaluate it. So I think maybe there's a couple of steps: understanding the different elements of a complete street and what the process would look like. May it be some kind of grading or matrix or some means to evaluate either a renovation project or a new project. And that's where we kind of landed in looking at that, and then going back to the policy and, seeing what all this means in terms of the policy. Dave, missing anything here?
No, staff is looking forward to meeting with the subcommittee to answer questions and help facilitate the discussion and review all of the questions. So we'll continue to look to make progress and provide reports back to the commission as we move forward.
I did forget a couple of things. A point that we talked about was overlaying budgetary constraints in an evaluation of complete streets and understanding what these things cost, in the context of evaluation of a project. And we also thought it would be good to go back and look at historically when this policy was brought into place and look at some projects that have occurred since then, be it Cass Old or 6th Street or whatever, and understand how the complete streets were looked at in the context of those projects. So I think there's something to be learned from what's happened in the last, 5 years, 4 years, and bring that into the discussion too. That seems to, I would really like to try to facilitate us having a tool very soon that the commissioners would also hopefully buy into and understand at the same time.
So you have a meeting scheduled for the subcommittee, and you guys are
Yes.
continuing on?
Yes.
Okay.
Our next meeting is the 28th, and Dave is
4
going to
p.m.
attend that.
Okay.
And Dave and Jessica, for the moment, are going to be providing some input to us.
Okay. Any questions for the subcommittee? All right. Thank you for your effort on that, complete streets. Next item on the agenda is calendar. Got the proposed close the gaps, proposed routes, close the gaps. I know that's next Monday. So that is just an open session.
Open house.
Okay.
We're going to take comments, which will be the same essentially as the comments on the Lawrence Listen survey. So if you haven't been on there, take the survey. Some of the routes have difficulties, but it's see what we can do.
Okay.
And then we're looking at bringing that item onto the regular agenda in October,
October commission
Yep.
meeting. So that would be next month. Right.
October 2nd, yep.
Okay. Any other calendar items that anybody wants to take forward?
Safe Routes for All Town Hall, next
Ah.
Thursday
Okay.
at 7, Liberty Hall.
Take a
You want
flyer.
flyers?
Take
Take
a
some,
flyer.
please.
All right. Any other calendar items? David, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. Isn't the city commission have a meeting about subcommittee, or not,
Advisory board.
advisory boards and stuff like that? When is that meeting, or has it happened? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Study session happened
Yeah,
a
okay.
couple weeks ago. I think.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm behind.
They
One
had a
month.
study session, but not any formal
Action or anything?
actions.
Okay. Anything we should know about that, out of that meeting?
No, nothing in direct relation to this board.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. With that, agenda item number 9 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second?
I'll second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Those opposed? Too bad.
Yeah, too bad. I'm opposed.
Good job.
Take flyers quickly, just know that.